Yeah, the only hardcore thing is that there is a extremely classified document dealing with religion, and it's about that thick. Period. But why would there be any classified material dealing with religion?
I want to go back to the religion thing. I want you to say it.
It's so far out.
All right, your objection has been noted.
Okay.
What does it say?
That we're containers. That's how supposedly the aliens look at us. That we are nothing but containers.
Containers of?
Containers. Maybe containers of souls. You can come up with whatever theory you want, but we're containers, and that's how we're mentioned in the documents. That religion was specifically created so we have some rules and regulations for the sole purpose of not damaging the containers.
Aliens see humans as soul containers. On the edge of UFO disclosure, all main religions must step forward and answer the call. Are we not the only creation of God? And if it's true, then are souls unique only to human beings, or extraterrestrial life forms have them too? What if they have a better understanding of the soul phenomena and learn how to use it? What if other creatures know how valuable the human soul is and are competing against each other for the right of harvesting us, and it's only the humankind who is ignoring and denying the facts that religions of the world were trying to warn us about? Hello my friends, my name is Mark, and in 2022 I had my first out-of-body experience while visiting my relatives in Ukraine during the war. And since then I became curious about this phenomena and went so deep studying it that eventually learned how to initiate OBE by my will, and now on this channel I'm sharing the knowledge that I gain, exercises that might help you to achieve it too, my weird and curious experiences that I encounter along the way, and many other interesting things. And in today's episode I want to share a creepy story that happened to me when I and my friend went for a 3-day fishing trip outside of Kiev, where I decided to test one of the ancient meditation protocols that was translated from the Sanskrit and is dated all the way back to 1500 BC, to basically try to establish, let's call it, a new stream of knowledge, to gather more useful information about our soul/consciousness and how to use it in a more efficient way. Now, since I want you to extract the maximum amount of value from my story, it is necessary to begin with breaking down some key moments, like where did I get this meditation from, the background of it, its purpose, and also I will give a short description of how to do it for those who will be curious and brave enough to give it a try. So let's dive in. Everything started when I first heard about Dr. Stephen Greer and his CE5 protocol. Dr. Stephen Greer, born in 1955, is an American ufologist and retired physician. He founded the Center for the Study of the Extraterrestrial Intelligence, short SETI, and the Disclosure Project, which seeks the disclosure of alleged classified UFO information. Now, what is the CE5 protocol? According to the Wikipedia, in a CE5 event, individuals or groups use specific protocols to establish communication or interaction with the extraterrestrial beings. These protocols primarily involve the use of the contact meditation and use of sounds and signals. CE5, that stands for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, are also referred to as a human-initiated close encounters. But how did Dr. Greer come up with this CE5 protocol? Interestingly, Dr. Greer didn't claim to invent the CE5 protocol. Instead, he discovered it in Vedas, a vast collection of ancient religious texts from India, written in Sanskrit. Sanskrit, by the way, is a classic Indo-Aryan language, is mostly used today in religious ceremonies across South Asia, Great Tibet, Greater Mongolia and Central Asia, and is often considered a dead language, believed by some to have been given to us by the gods in the ancient times. You might be surprised to learn how deeply intertwined the extraterrestrial narrative is within religious traditions, beliefs, practices, and legends that are written in a Sanskrit, as well as the cultures and regions where this ancient language was once spoken. For example, the famous Bhagavad Gita, a Sanskrit epic poem of ancient India, describes mysterious flying objects called vimanas. These vimanas are depicted as a large, magnificent aerial chariots capable of flying at incredible speeds, traveling both space and underwater, and carrying numerous passengers. Another intriguing link between UFO phenomena and this time Tibetan culture comes from a well-known historical fact. The Nazis of the Third Reich, obsessed with creating a flying saucer to gain an advantage in World War II, spent significant resources on the expeditions to Tibet. Their goal was to connect with the local high priests and knowledge keepers, hoping to uncover ancient texts in the vast monastery libraries that might describe how to build these flying machines referred to as vimanas. There are many other direct and indirect pieces of evidence such as archaeological sites, documents, literature, and witnesses' testimonies that suggest ancient cultures that were using Sanskrit were aware of the extraterrestrial existence. These cultures were believed to have communicated with these beings, summoned them, and received advanced knowledge in the various fields, ranging from medicine and astronomy to the human soul and the structure of the afterlife. Now, the story. Event that I'm about to share occurred in the fall of 2023. My friend and I decided to go fishing on the Dnieper River just outside of the Kiev. We planned to camp on one of the many peninsulas along the Dnieper and stay in the tent for 3 days. At that time, I had already been experimenting with the CE5 protocol for about 6 months. The results were intriguing, but most of them fell short of the excitement I had anticipated. My primary goal with the CE5 was to see if I could establish contact in any possible form, with my main request always being the same: if you hear me, teach me how to initiate an out-of-body experience, because I am seeking to learn more and know the truth. Unfortunately, all I encountered were minor paranormal activities like objects slightly moving, my cat going nuts and meowing at the front door all night as if someone were standing behind it, though no one was there, odd dreams, flying orbs in my apartment, feelings of being followed and watched, and hearing footsteps and voices coming from the empty rooms of my apartment. While these occurrences weren't exactly what I had hoped for, they didn't disturb me. Rather, they heightened my curiosity. These experiences served as a signal that the CE5 protocol was working, at least to some degree, even if it wasn't delivering the results I initially expected. I added it to my list of proven not BS techniques that required more detailed research and perhaps more practice. Since I had only been trying the CE5 protocol at home, our planned trip seemed like the perfect opportunity to test it in a different environment. This new setting had clear advantage over the home option. First, Dr. Greer originally suggested conducting the protocol outdoors in the remote areas with low human density, as this creates a more private and suitable atmosphere for the contact. Second, being outside allows you to monitor the sky for any unusual objects if the protocol works, compared to being confined by walls and the ceiling when you're practicing it at home. Another tip from the Dr. Greer was to initiate CE5 protocol a couple days earlier prior to the trip, and kind of send a message with the location where you will be staying and waiting for the guests from another world. Now I will precisely describe all the steps in the CE5 protocol so you could better understand how it works in case you would be curious to try it yourself. Step 1. Begin with the 20 to 30 minutes meditation. Focus on clearing your mind completely. Your goal is to silence your inner voice and achieve a profound state of mental emptiness. You aim to reach a meditative depth where you no longer feel your body and can completely detach from its existence. Step 2. Once you are deeply meditative, concentrate on the sensations within your body, gathering energy at the top of your head, also known as the crown chakra in Eastern esoteric traditions. Simultaneously, formulate a simple, clear message in your mind. On this day, I will be at this place. Whoever hears this message, come visit me. I'm eager to make new friends and to learn. Then mentally drop a pin, as if using Google Maps, to mark the exact location where you plan to be on a chosen date. Step 3. When you will feel sufficient pressure building at your crown chakra, visualize sending this accumulated energy along with the message upward into space. Imagine yourself soaring at high speed, watching as Earth and your specific meditation location gradually shrinking in view, much like zooming out on a Google Maps. Step 4. Finally, as you reach the vastness of the space and enter the dark void filled with stars, visualize your energy beam bursting forth like a supernova. This explosion sent your message radiating outward in all directions, spreading it across the cosmos. Repeat the protocol several times before concluding. Ideally, you even can receive some kind of instant response. For example, after finishing the protocol, I like to spend an extra 10 to 20 minutes returning to step 1, staying in the meditative state with a clear mind and observing what comes through. Occasionally, you might receive a vision. For me, this often manifests as someone's eyes staring at me, or sometimes the faces of gray aliens or humanoid figures briefly appearing in my consciousness before fading away. Interestingly, I frequently see Egyptian hieroglyphs scrolling down before my eyes, or visions of pyramids and deserts. The connection to the Egypt remains a mystery to me, as I've never been particularly drawn to the ancient Egyptian culture. Nonetheless, if you're as impatient as I am, it might be worth taking the time to ensure that you establish at least a mental connection, so you know the protocol is working. So, back to our fishing trip. I carried out the CE5 protocol for 2 days in a row before my friend and I went outdoors, sending a message with the precise location of where we'd be camping. During those 2 sessions, I didn't receive any response to my call, but I wasn't discouraged. I remained skeptical that the ritual would give anything new beyond what I had previously experienced. On this first day, at the peninsula, the exact place you can see on a map, we arrived, unpacked all our gear, set up the tent, organized the fireplace, and started fishing. Everything seemed normal. That evening around 9 p.m. I decided to do another deep meditation session, followed by the CE5 protocol, hoping to increase my chances of seeing something during our first night. But once again, there was no response. Instead, during the final part of the meditation, when I should have been sitting in a peaceful silence, free from thoughts and open to any sign that I had been heard, I completely lost control over my mental focus. An endless flow of frustrating thoughts overwhelmed me, making me angry that I can't concentrate, and because of that might send to the waste 3 days of effort. The thoughts of having invested so much time without any result was disappointing, and I was ready to give up on the experience. I thought it might be best to leave any hope for the contact until the next day in a best case, or perhaps even until the next trip. After finishing the protocol and meditation, I stood up and a wave of overthinking completely consumed me. Instead of relaxing by the campfire, stargazing and enjoying nature, I found myself pacing in circles, unable to stop analyzing what went wrong. I wondered why my previous attempts had been successful but failed to bring any response over these 3 days, especially today. My thoughts began to spiral, shifting to other urgent matters in my life that seemed to invade my mental space. By 11 p.m., overwhelmed by these thoughts and suffering from the headache, I decided to leave camp for a short walk. I couldn't stay still any longer. During the walk, my thoughts raced uncontrollably, feeling like I was processing multiple thoughts simultaneously. This was unusual for me, but I attribute it to the stress accumulated over 1.5 years of living in a war zone. Frustrated with my mental chaos, I commanded myself, enough. Surprisingly, this helped. My thoughts began to slow and I felt a bit of relief as my headache gradually eased. As I continued my stroll, I focused on one topic: aliens. I thought about what the first contact might look like, their appearance, colors, shapes, and whether I would be scared or if they might see humans as a threat. As I mentally navigated these thoughts, I repeatedly asked, why won't you show up? Why are you hiding? We need you here. Don't you see what's happening? People are unaliving each other. It needs to be stopped. My internal questioning almost felt like begging. Exhausted and discouraged, I decided to let go of the experiment and simply enjoy my time off. Around midnight, I returned to the camp. My friend and I made tea, enjoyed a chat, and agreed to get some rest so we could wake up early the next morning to fish. Once we were inside the tent and turned off the light to sleep, I was struck again by the deep sense of frustration over what felt like a waste of time. Determined to make the most of my day, I decided to practice my out-of-body experience skills and see how they would work in the outdoors setting. At that time, my experiences with the OBEs had been limited, and I had been exploring various reasons why I struggled to have them each night. One of the theory I had was that living in a big city surrounded by crowds and electronic devices might be affecting my ability to separate from my body. So I saw this outdoor setting as a perfect opportunity to test this theory and see if the change in the environment would make a difference. I began my OBE routine. If you're curious how I do it and want to try it yourself, check out my video tutorial, link be in the description, and don't forget to share the results of your experiences in the comments. Unfortunately, that night I was so physically and emotionally drained that I lost control halfway through the separation from my body and ended up passing out. But after what felt like 10-15 minutes, I regained consciousness and found myself standing outside our tent. My vision was blurry and buzzing sounds surrounded me. It was the familiar signal that I was out of my body. A wave of happiness and satisfaction washed over me as I realized I had succeeded. Yes, my theory was right. I did it again. Even feeling a brief moment of pride. But I quickly reminded myself that I need to move further away from my sleeping body to avoid getting pulled back into it. I looked up to decide which direction to go, but my attention suddenly locked into two strange faces peering at me from behind a bush about 20 to 30 meters away. They were bald, with the enormous black eyes, and it took me a second to realize that these were living beings, creatures that could actually see me. In the blink of an eye, one of the faces appeared right in front of me. It moved with such incredible speed, like watching a video speed up tenfold, where all you see is a blur rushing through the space. Now, face to face, I could see the being more clearly. It was about 3 feet tall, with a disproportional large head and a grayish-yellow skin. Its huge dark eyes seemed to have pupils that focused on me. The face had very human-like features, a tiny nose and narrow lips that formed a gentle smile. We stood there, locked in eye contact, for what felt like a few seconds. The realization of what I was seeing hadn't fully hit me yet, but a growing sense of horror began to creep up. It definitely wasn't a human form standing in front of me that I so used to see each time when I would successfully leave my own body and decided to explore streets of my neighborhood. It didn't look transparent or foggy. It was like something that had a physical body, was absolutely aware of my presence, and came closer to take a look on me. Suddenly, when the feeling of the horror almost took over me, I felt an impulse that came from the creature in front of me, and then the horror vanished, replaced by an overwhelming calm and peace, as if encountering this being was the most normal thing in the world. It was as if someone had flipped a switch inside of me, altering my mood in an instant. The shift was so sudden and profound that it felt like a wave washing over my etherical body, changing my emotions in a heartbeat. The strange being then grabbed my hand. I noticed it had 4 elongated fingers, and it began to lead me somewhere. Everything around us became blurry, like looking out of the car window at the highest speed. After a moment we stopped, and I found myself in a bizarre place. Behind me was the same natural landscape, trees, bushes and the river, but in front of me was a technical room with the metal grey walls and the ceiling. It felt as if the room and the surrounding nature had somehow fused together, and I was standing right on the border between the two. The room was long and narrow, like a corridor stretching forward and turning to the left. Strange cables run from the ceiling down the floor. To my right, I notice in the upright tube about 3 to 4 meters tall and 1.5 meters in diameter, with the seam that resembled a door. 2 aliens stood beside it. Suddenly a thought, or perhaps a command, popped up in my head: go inside. I became tense, fearing that they might want to put me in that tube. One of the aliens walked behind the tube and disappeared, while the other, the one who had brought me there, stood watching me. I looked back and saw the familiar view of nature still behind me, so I decided to take a few steps forward, going around the tube, when I noticed its front was made of some kind of transparent material. Inside the tube was a liquid substance, and floating with it was the silhouette of a woman. My heart skipped a beat. I moved closer, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. As I got near, I saw a red-haired woman in her early 20s, completely naked and unconscious, floating in the liquid. I tried to get a better look at her face, and suddenly her eyes and mouth shut open as if she had just woke up. She slammed her palm against the glass, and I jumped back in shock. The instant thought that hit me was, she's drowning, she needs help. I rushed to the glass, kicking it with the side of my fist, but it didn't budge. Desperate, I turned around and spotted something long secured on the wall. I grabbed it, trying to tear it off to use as a tool to break the glass and free the woman. I pulled it with all my strength, but the next moment, bam! I was suddenly back in my tent, eyes wide open, breathing heavily and feeling like my body was buzzing with the electricity. I grabbed my phone to check the time. It was around 3 a.m. As the realization of what just happened washed over me, I quickly opened the Notes app on my phone and wrote everything down while the memory was still fresh. I spent an entire hour calming myself and writing down everything that had just happened. The emotions were intense, the CE5 protocol had worked, and it had far exceeded any expectation I might have had. This was a new level of experience for me, and I was excited, but alongside the excitement there was an unsettling feeling, a nagging question. Was this a positive experience, or had I just pulled myself into something dangerous? Finally, around 4 or 4:30 a.m., after documenting every detail I could recall in the notes of my phone, I decided it was time to get some sleep, this time without attempting to have another out-of-body experience. I fell asleep quickly, but after what felt like only 10-15 minutes, I found myself outside of the tent once again. Familiar vibrational sound and electrical sensation signed that I was out of my body again. As I focused my eyes, I froze. About 16 feet away from me stood an upright dark cloud around 5 feet tall. It looked as if it was made of smoke from burning tire, its edges not solid but shifting like a fire or smoke. At the top, where I assumed its head would be, I saw 2 red dots staring at me, its eyes. The moment our eyes locked, I hear a voice in my head, angry and confrontational, as if this thing was disappointed in me and wanted to challenge me. The voice said, quote, "What do you think you are doing? You think you can save this planet by sitting here and meditating?" For a moment I stood there frozen, trying to make sense of what was happening. Strangely, I felt no fear, only a strong sense of confrontation and the anger radiating from the dark figure. Then, out of nowhere, a wave of uncontrollable giggles overtook me. It was as if I were a school kid who had done something wrong but found it absolutely hilarious, standing in front of the head teacher, trying to keep a straight face but barely holding back the laughter. Meanwhile, the dark figure continued to watch me, its anger growing more intense. To my own surprise, I found myself responding to its question. I said, "Yes, I do think so." And at that moment I collapsed into uncontrollable giggling. The thought of this being disappointment over my actions was the funniest thing in the world to me at that moment. The dark cloud seemed to be boiled with even more anger. I could feel how furious it was. It turned as if to leave the scene, and then, in an instant, it was gone. Suddenly I was sucked back into my body and opened my physical eyes. It was early morning and it was time to go catch some fish. So that was my experience with the CE5 protocol, doing it outdoors. It took me a while to make sense of it and understand what happened and why. Some parts of what I saw were easier to accept and explain. For example, the fact that I was calling the aliens resulted in their appearance, the way they look, and the ability to instantly move from one point to another in a fraction of a second. Even the two fused dimensions where I saw the technical room and our campsite surrounded by nature, these were all things I found explanation for, along with the other people's descriptions that correlate with what I saw. Numerous experts in the UFO community have offered explanation based on quantum mechanics, suggesting that gray aliens are far more advanced than us. They might know how to manipulate space and time with the technologies that allow them to cross dimensions. Or perhaps they themselves come from another dimension. This topic even caught the attention of the whistleblower David Grusch and the Congresswoman Luna on the historical hearing of the US Congress about the UFOs, where they suggested that these phenomena might originate from other dimensions rather than out of space. But for me, the main mysteries were in following aspects. Who was that woman in the tube? Why was she there? Why did they show her to me? And the biggest question, what was that talking dark cloud? Why was it angry at me, and how was it connected to my initial experience with the gray aliens? I was clueless. I had encountered shadow creatures before. If you are curious to know more about them, I'm sharing my initial experience in the previous video. The link will be in the description. But the last time I saw them, I explained it to myself in a completely different way. Now, this shadow appeared right after my communication with the aliens, and it was clearly experiencing emotions, anger in particular, which indicate a much more complex level of consciousness that I had previously thought. Before, I considered them more like energy with the lower consciousness existing on the lower densities of the astral plane, constantly looking for sources of energy to feed themselves, and even being used as an instrument of human will in exchange for a bit of human energy. This approach was shaped by my experiences with OBEs. Some might call them esoteric, but this time it was different. Two completely separate worlds had collided, and I had no logical explanation for it, or at least reports that someone else experienced the same, until I discovered Linda Moulton Howe. On her Earth Files YouTube channel, I found 2 episodes that shed some light on what I had experienced. Linda Moulton Howe, a journalist and investigator of the UFO phenomena, discussed a case where a contactee described a similar sequence of events. First, she had a contact with the gray aliens, which led to an encounter about a month later with what she described as a giant, unfriendly shadow staring at her in her bedroom. Let's watch a short fragment from the Linda's interview with the contactee.
I was just closing my eyes to go to sleep, and then I suddenly felt a presence in the room, and I opened my eyes, and I was just absolutely terrified to see this gigantic 8-foot-tall, dense black shadow figure with really broad shoulders, and it was just towering over the edge of my bed, and there was actually a window across from my bed that had a shade down on it, but moonlight still kind of shined through, and that's how I could clearly see the silhouette of this being, because the light was coming through the window and it was standing kind of in front of it, but a little bit off to the side. So I could clearly see like the silhouette or the outline of it, and that no light was coming through it or going. So it wasn't like a shadow, it wasn't transparent.
And it was definitely a hooded figure.
Oh yes, it looked like, I would describe like if someone were wearing a long black like cape with a hood on it. Like it looked like that, just the shape of it. And I guess, yeah, people call them hooded figures.
Right.
But it was really like long. Like I knew that it wasn't a human because humans are not that big. It was just very big. And so I was absolutely terrified when I saw that. And my eyes were open, and that's the thing, is like I was awake, because some people say that they see hooded figures in sleep paralysis, and then when they see these things, they can't move. But that's what was so scary about it, was that I could move. Like, my eyes were open and I could move. I was just so afraid of what this thing was that I didn't want to make any sudden movements. I didn't really know what to do. I was just sort of waiting to see if it would, like, fade away, or maybe I was dreaming and maybe I would wake up, but that was not happening. Like, I was looking at this thing for, like, about 30 seconds and nothing was happening, and it was just very scary because even though it didn't have a face, I felt like it was angry at me. Like, it was just staring at me, and just I felt lots of, like, angry energy. It did not feel good or like it was a friendly thing. And so I was like, it's not going away. So I sort of started to get up to like turn the light on. And then as soon as I moved to get up, that's when it faded away.
Did you have any impression in your mind, intuitively or otherwise, even with images in your mind, about why this hooded figure in your bedroom on Earth should be angry at you?
Well, when I thought about it after the fact, because of my previous encounter on the month before, when I saw that ET that was telling me all this information about my soul and everything, and telling me that it was indicating that I was protected, I felt like this creature came, or this being came, and was very angry about that. It feels like there's this ongoing battle. I don't know why, but it's this ongoing battle between good energy and bad energy.
As you can see, there seems to be a connection between these experiences. Initially, a person encounters an alien, typically described as a humanoid and perceived as a neutral or even benevolent. But then, shortly after, whether it's a month later as in Noel's case, or just 1.5 or 2 hours later, as it was for me, a shadowy figure appears, executing hostility. Now I have a theory about what this shadow might be and why it showed up, but before we dive into that, let's watch the second short clip about the glass preservation tubes and the people inside them.
Is there an avatar soul link between some humans and ETs? That question first came up when I was writing my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness, in the early 1990s. That's when some UFO abductees were sketching clear glass tubes with light shining from the top and bottom onto tall blonde-haired, tall black-haired, tall red-haired, tall brown-haired, and some shorter human bodies, seemingly all in suspended animation in these preservation tubes. One female abductee was told she would undergo, quote, translation into the light, close quote. One short, 5-foot-tall human female abductee named Juana Lawson from New Jersey had experienced transference into a tall, thin, female, white-skinned, black-haired humanoid body preserved in a clear glass tube. I asked her, what did the tall ETs want to accomplish? Juana answered, quote, they wanted to take a sub-creature and evolve it to the level that they are on and prove it could be done. But why? To prove that what is not pure and good could be made pure and good. So is the soul the major challenge? Are tall beings inserting the experimental preserved bodies with souls? Juana answered, quote, no, with their genes, taking from themselves and putting their genes into the fetuses of the human entity. Each time you do that, you get a higher evolution to teach love, unity, oneness with this conscious universe, close quote.
As you can see from the second clip, these preservation tubes are a common element reported during alien encounters. By the way, in Linda's book Glimpses of Other Realities Volume 2, she dedicates 106 pages chapter that entitled, quote, Body Containers and Souls of Light, close quote, in which abductees describe being taken in large rooms with line after line of clear tubes, each containing a living human or non-human in suspended animation. I have to be honest with you, I haven't read her book, as it is nearly impossible to get a copy of it in Ukraine. However, the idea that Linda and the people she interviewed put forth in that these bodies are used as containers for what we call human soul, allowing a soul or a consciousness to enter the empty body and have a human experience or perform some necessary tasks, almost like in a Steven Spielberg's Avatar movie. Some people who develop this theory suggest that this might be necessary because our planet is on the verge of significant shift that could lead to the human extinction. In this scenario, aliens might be trying to save part of humanity by extracting more mature human souls to eventually place them in the new bodies to reseed the planet and restart the civilization. Idea is that aliens' goal is to create a new iteration of human beings less prone to hostility and more capable of evolving into peaceful, unified interplanetary society rather than remaining a collection of nations driven by fear, greed and power struggles. And if the theory that our bodies are only vessels, containers or instruments that being used by the pilot that is our soul is right, and highly evolved civilizations from outer space or other dimensions are aware of it, they might want to use this opportunity of global shift to eliminate souls/pilots that are not fit in the certain frame of their vision of the perfect future for the humanity, and save others who by their opinion will act based on the highly moral values. Personally, I agree with Linda's conclusions. I see a similar concept in many religions and cultures where the human body is viewed as a vessel for our consciousness, which we use to experience life and fulfill our purpose. Astral projection or out-of-body experiences provide direct evidence that we are not just our physical bodies. We are consciousness and soul capable of leaving the body and returning back to it. And even talking about this global shift and elimination of some souls and saving others, it kind of goes along with what we can find in a certain religious texts like Bible, for example, where during the Judgment Day or Last Day of Humanity, Jesus Christ, Son of the God, will individually judge each person by looking at their actions, feelings, thoughts, words and sins, and you won't be able to hide anything from Jesus at that moment, as he'll see it all. After Jesus judges each person, he'll divide them into two groups, the saved and the doomed. At the end of Judgment Day, Jesus will condemn the doomed to hell with the Satan and take the saved with him to a new heaven. To me, both interpretation sounds very similar. I even tend to believe that it might be true. I don't know. Let's figure it out together. Let me know what your thoughts on this in the comments. Now you might ask, but what about the shadow figures? How are they related to the aliens? There's a widespread speculation online that shadow people, particularly when they appear after the extraterrestrial encounter, are some sort of a man in black from another dimension that trying to prevent and control humans from engaging too closely with the alien phenomena. I don't subscribe to that theory. Instead, I see shadow people as a byproduct of post-contact experiences. Let me explain. Imagine a bug or a fly falls into a lake. When it tries to take off and fly away, it can't, but instead creates ripples on the water surface. Fish can sense these vibrations and they become attracted to the source. I believe that contact with aliens, much like when you have an OBE, releases a vast amount of energy and creates energetical ripples in the surrounding space, attracting these creatures that feed on human energy. When these ripples are particularly strong, as in my contact case, since my emotions were going through the roof and I was draining my energy into surrounding space like crazy, the shadow entities can't resist coming to see what's happening. But when it arrived and sensed the energy of my intentions, this phenomena called psychometry, and humans are capable of it too, it got angry because my aim is to make progress in ending violence and persuading as many people as possible to live in a civilized way. And this would frustrate the shadows because emotions like violence and fear generate far more energy than states of peace and calm, which mean less energy to feed from. Again, it's my interpretation that is based on my multiple experiences and information that I gathered and learned from other sources who encountered similar things. I could be right or I could be wrong. Only time will show. Either way, I'm open to the conversation and discussion. So leave your comments, tell me what you think, and share your experiences. Maybe some of you have seen the same things or know people have had similar encounters. I'd be happy to hear your stories and continue learning together. With that being said, thank you for watching, thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao!